to everyone and welcome so much for joining us. This is the Uplift Coalition Kickoff. My name is Melissa James and I'm the CEO of REACH. And it is my pleasure to serve alongside my colleagues and partners, Tara Garaya, the CEO of the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, and Bruce Stensley, the CEO of the Economic Development Collaborative, in welcoming you to today's discussion. Together, we make up Uplift Central Coast, a 6-county partnership formed to attract investment and opportunity for the greater Central Coast region with the purpose of uplifting Central Coast residents. Before we get too much further, we may have a few participants who need Spanish translation today, and we have Cuca Silva here with us providing interpretation. So I'm going to pause for just a moment to welcome Cuca to give those instructions for participants needing interpretation now. We will also put the instructions in the chat.
Thank you. Este es un mensaje bilingüe y será repetido en inglés. Hola, yo soy Cuca Silva y seré su intérprete en esta reunión. Para facilitar el acceso lingüístico, proporcionaré interpretación simultánea entre inglés y español. Si usted es bilingüe, no tiene que presionar nada. Si usted no es bilingüe en inglés y español, tendrá que elegir el idioma en el que desea escuchar la interpretación. Si está usando una computadora, verá un icono de globo en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla que dice Interpretación. Haga clic ahí y seleccione Español. Si está usando la aplicación de Zoom en un iPad o el teléfono, busque el menú de 3 puntos en la parte superior de su pantalla, haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas y elija Español. Y por último, finalizar. Les recordamos a los oradores que hablen uno a la vez y a paso moderado. Hello, I am Cuca Silva, and I will be your interpreter for this meeting. In order to provide language access, I will be providing interpretation between English and Spanish. If you are bilingual, you do not have to press anything. If you are not bilingual in English and Spanish, you will have to select the language that you want to hear the interpretation in. If you're on a PC or laptop, look for the globe icon at the bottom right that says Interpretation and select English. If you're on a Zoom application on an iPad or your phone, locate the 3-dot menu on the top right, click on Language Interpretation, and then select English, and then done. We'd like to remind our speakers to please speak one at a time at a moderate pace. Thank you.
Thank you, Cuca. It's a good reminder to keep pace with our comments. Some quick housekeeping items for everyone. It is so great to see so many familiar faces. Many of you were with us during the working sessions last summer, developing the application, and from just so many faces from around the community. It's great to see you here. We're going to ask, and those of you who've been in these meetings before will remember, we like to have an active chat over on the side, and we would love to have you use the chat to say hello, share your name, your organization, and what county you are tuning in from. Another item as a reminder, this is a large meeting, so we do ask that you stay muted. We're also going to ask and invite you to put your questions in the chat. We will get to as many as we can throughout the program, and with the remaining time that we have at the end, we will answer some questions with all of you. And as an FYI, I think you would have seen as well as you came into the meeting that we are recording this meeting, and we will provide that at the end. So as we jump in with all that housekeeping aside, I want to remind everyone on what we're working on together. The Community Economic Resilience Fund, known as SERF, is a $600 million program designed to catalyze planning and action to realize an equitable and sustainable economy across California's diverse regions to foster long-term economic resilience in the overall transition to a carbon neutral economy. We are thrilled to have the opportunity to kick off this 6-county, 2-year, $5 million project to create an inclusive economic development process with the focus on equity, sustainability, job quality, economic competitiveness, and resilience. As a region, we have so many shared opportunities and shared challenges that we face together. Most recent of all is what we have been through together with the local devastation and flooding that has displaced many people from across the region and the state. And we wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge the impacts that are deeply felt by many and disproportionately so by those from historically marginalized and disinvested communities in our region, which is an important reminder of why this work we're doing together matters as we strengthen our collective resilience through relationship and collaboration to navigate the challenges that we face as a community now and into the future. So thank you for adapting with us as we move this meeting from last week to this week so that many more people could join. And with that brief welcome, I am thrilled to be able to turn it over to my Uplift colleagues for a brief welcome as well, starting with Tara Garaya.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and happy Friday. Again, Tara Garaya, President and CEO of the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. Really happy to see you all. This has been a long time in making. It's really good to see us re-engaged since the summer. I know many of you were with us as we formulated the proposal, and you provided valuable feedback that, in fact, that now we're in the space of moving forward and getting the work underway. So I'm really excited. This is long overdue for us to be reunited, reconnected, and move forward. I cannot explain to the extent, and many of you know, how important and vital this work is over the course of the next 2 years. And each of the communities represent, each of the organizations you represent, and there will be bumps and hiccups along the way, like all work is, that is important and valuable. But I think together that we can create an inclusive and economic development plan that speaks for our communities. And this is where we will lean on you to provide that valuable feedback and help us learn through the process and use us as more as shepherds. This is really our collective, how should I say, project. It's not Uplift, it's not MBEP, REACH, or EDC. It's our program to really uplift the voices, the narratives, and the real lived experience is across our 6 counties. So I'm really excited. I've been sort of hoping we could get going sooner, and now here we are. And I'll turn it over to Bruce, who also shares in our excitement to get this work on the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Melissa. Hi, Bruce Stensley, President and CEO of the Economic Development Collaborative. We're here in Ventura County, Santa Barbara, do some work with Melissa and others in San Luis, and thrilled to be a partner in this huge responsibility and opportunity. For just a couple of things, just want to acknowledge one key point, that a key feature of SURF and of our Uplift Coalition is to honor this whole notion of creating a broadly inclusive partnership, input, engagement, come up with the kind of strategy, the kind of priorities that will really drive our economy. So I want to recognize that we've got, I think, some 400 folks who logged into this, or at least signed up, and we hope you're all there as we're watching the comments go by. We have elected officials, we have state agencies. We're so happy to be a partner with Labor and Workforce Agency at the state, Governor's Office of Planning and Research, Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. But then, you know, there are 12 stakeholder groups that are to be engaged in this process. So we're thrilled for the education partners that you're here, organized labor leadership throughout the region, social justice, environmental justice, and the list goes on. Just a huge thanks for your patience, for your support in our getting this application together, and now the launch and moving forward. So thanks for being here. I think from here, I kick it back to Melissa. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And I am going to take a moment to share my screen. We're going to jump into the bulk of our content here this afternoon. Here's our quick run through of our agenda for the day. We're going to take a minute to welcome and meet the team. We're going to do a project overview. It'll be a reminder to so many of you that helped work on the application and help us all level set on what we're going to be embarking on together. We have some featured speakers that are going to be sharing with us a little bit about the value and the impact of this work. And then we're going to get into the next steps and some of the first pieces that we need to be moving together as a region. And then our hope is that we have time at the end for some questions. And as a reminder, feel free to use the chat to ask questions throughout. So with that, I'm going to share a couple brief comments to reorient us into the team. I think everyone realizes that it's the Uplift Coalition is a 3-agency partnership with all agencies serving as co-conveners in the region, the EDC serving as the fiscal agent, and REACH as the overarching regional convener as we move this work forward in partnership with many of you. Our team is kind of being built out across our 3 agencies, a number of faces up here that many of you recognize and many that will be new in the coming weeks and months. We're excited to get the time to spend getting to know you with folks in community outreach roles on the ground in our communities, and then a lot of folks under the hood with project management, admin and coordination and so forth. With that, I am excited to introduce you all to our Uplift Project Director, Quinn Brady, who's recently joined our team. Quinn is a community organizer who has deep experience working with organizations such as UndocuSupport, Race Matters, and the Climate Coalition, Advancing Causes and Equity, Education, Climate Action, and many others. So we're so thrilled to have her leadership, and she's going to take a moment to run through a little bit of our project.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa and Tara and Bruce. So happy to be here with everyone today and working alongside our community to move this project forward. It's really meaningful to me to do this work across our region and state, and I look forward to working with so many of you. If we haven't got the chance to meet yet, I look forward to really working in deep collaboration with you in the months to come. My hope today is that we all walk away with more understanding about why this work matters and why it's so important and what it is that we are really creating together. As we jump into a broad overview of the project and work together, I want to first just acknowledge and thank the over 150 organizations and individuals who participated in the development of the SURF application and wrote letters of support. For many of you, what we cover today will be a reminder of what we created together, as the real design of this project was built by this community, not just by those of us who are presenting today. When you look around the event and all the faces that are here, so many people were instrumental in getting us to where we are, and your partnership will be just as crucial as we move forward in the coming months. The overarching goal of our work is really to uplift residents and our regional economy and create transformative opportunities for the people that call our region home. At the center of this work is deliberately inclusive community engagement and a focus on equity, sustainability, workforce development, and economic competitiveness and resilience. A few quick objectives just to highlight. Developing broad coalition is really important to what we're doing, both to the design, the strategies together for implementation, and to create a high road transition collaborative that will allow us to draw on strongly connected collaborative group of organizations and community members, and to strengthen our own resilience to advance this work into the future. We'll be conducting comprehensive regional economic workforce analysis to inform our process all throughout this. And we'll also be developing a holistic economic development transition roadmap with strategies that prioritize the creation of high quality jobs, equitable access to jobs and resources, and the development of sustainable and resilient economies and industries. On this next slide, I will share a little bit about the main part of our goal in this SURF is to really disrupt the normal processes and business as usual and build an equitable and sustainable economy across California's diverse regions. Our work lives at this intersection right here of economic opportunity, equity, and sustainability, which will serve as our North Star through this project. This is a lens that will permeate all our project decisions, the criteria, from stakeholder engagement to governance and metrics. Our Uplift objectives will keep this lens at the center of our work. So our steering committee and our governance structure, which we'll talk a little bit more about soon, everything will run through that as we vet people and process and projects through this lens of economic opportunity, sustainability, and equity. I want to give a really brief overview on this next slide of where we are right now. In September of 21, SB 162 was signed into law. And then in the following months, so many of you worked together to build that collaborative application that was representative of the voices of the Central Coast. In October, we learned that Uplift was the recipient of a $5 million SURF grant And our work kicked off just a few weeks ago when that contract was executed. We began onboarding our project management team, and that brings us to today, where we're kicking off our work with all of you. And next week we'll be in Sacramento, joining our counterparts from across the state to officially begin our work together. Well, this has been a long time coming and many have been eager to get things rolling. We're really excited that you're taking the time to be here with us today and take these next steps. Before we dive in a little bit deeper to the specific components of the project, I want to give just a super broad overview and look at what we are working on and what we're creating together. Here we are in phase 1 of the project, taking the next several weeks to set up our internal structure, establishing our governance committees, which I'm really excited about and we're going to share more about in a few minutes. We'll build out and activate our inclusivity fund to resource participants and make sure our table is inclusive and anybody that wants to be there can be. And all of this is really about how we create the ability for our community to participate and making sure that we have the communication tools and project partners in place so we can meaningfully move forward into the next phases of data analysis and community engagement. Then we'll move into that analysis and mapping that will inform the strategy and plan, and we'll begin activating our community convenings and roundtables, and that will inform phase 3, where we begin to bring it all together and form strategies to define our plan. With that kind of broad understanding, I'm going to kick it over to Melissa, who's going to take us a little bit deeper into the governance structure.
Thanks, Quinn. So the governance will be a reminder to those who participated in the development of the application, and for those who are new, we'll get a good level set. This was a really important component of a lot of our work in coming through the application development. And just as a brief overview, we have a 6-county region in the Central Coast, and we have broken up our governance structure into kind of a nested model with an overarching 6-county region, but broken into 2 subregions from the north and the south that you can kind of see here. And then our governance structure, the way that it's going to look, this kind of gives you the broad overview. Within the SURF application, there's 12 different constituencies that you can see over on the left side that are listed. We are going to be putting together 2 sub-regional steering committees, one with the Tri-Counties to the north, one with the Tri-Counties to the south, that have a representative in each of those constituencies on the left. So think 12 and 12. Those 2 sub-regional steering committees will map up into a larger overarching regional steering committee that will be setting the priorities and steering the project. And so that would be a sum total of about 24 people. Below that, you can kind of see what's holding it up is the project administration. So you see the project manager is Uplift Central Coast. We've all introduced ourselves to you. We are helping to staff and organize this project, but the decision making will be done by the Regional Steering Committee. We also have what is called the Uplift Vision Committee, and they will play a very important function to both recommend who will sit on these steering committees, but they will also kind of help to guide and keep the project aligned with that North Star vision that Quinn laid out. When it gets to the point of setting priorities and looking at projects to fund and recommend, they will be an early vetting body that will then make recommendations up to the steering committee. So they'll play a really important function there. That does not summarize all of the engagement that's happening. There will be a tremendous amount of community engagement, different types of issue roundtables that will be set up in and around the community as well, that will feed into the overarching process. And I think with that, I will shift it over to Tara to speak through a little bit of the data and mapping and stakeholder engagement that will be so critical to our overarching project.
Thank you, Melissa. And certainly as we embark on this very ambitious project, a critical project that's laid forward by the state and there's various resources, a critical component to that is, of course, data and mapping and our stakeholders, right? And community leaders and you around this Zoom room play a critical role in shaping that data and a research agenda. What needs to be collected? How do we make sure there's accurate and meaningful data that represents truly our various communities throughout the 6 counties, and especially our historically disinvested and BIPOC communities? And how explicit do we want that to be? So these are some of the components that we've laid out. Certainly, we need to make sure we have stakeholder mapping. Where are our key communities? What are the industry clusters, and analyzing a snapshot of the current industries, what is projected, what's trending, our regional summary of our demographic and socioeconomic conditions across our 6 counties, and what are our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities and threats, and how do we analyze that, and then analyze our labor market. You know, as we said before in our proposal outlines, we live in an incredibly beautiful area, but part of that beauty is also the people that make up our community. And so we need to accurately represent our labor market and those that can be reskilled and upskilled. And as we look at data and research, we want to make sure that we are closely aligned with our stakeholder engagement and build that capacity. And we will get into that a little bit more. And the analysis has to be aligned with what our communities want and what is prioritized. So part of the function of our steering committee and the Northern and Southern subregion is to help drive those conversations, as will the issue area subcommittees. And more information will come along as to figure out how we do that, but you play a critical role as we lay out the data and figure out which data needs to be collected, how do we map it out, and how do we meaningfully engage our stakeholders. And then going on to the stakeholder engagement, I want to share briefly like how we currently envision the engagement. Certainly, we're constantly looking for your feedback, and keep in mind this was all surfaced and bubbled up through our various community engagement exercises that we did over the course of the summer. And we heard from you very clearly, we want to make sure there are translation services, there's asynchronous way of sharing information online for those who can make it in person or online. We have to find different modes of sharing information and tailoring our messages. So we want to make sure things are publicly available, virtually, we are hybrid, in person with issue roundtables, sub-regional convenings, listening sessions, and then an integral component to all of that, that Bruce will talk about a little bit more, is the Inclusivity Fund, which is almost, if not more than 50% of our budget that we've put forward to make sure that our communities have access to true engagement. And what that will look like, again, stay tuned, and we are eager to engage our community and also hear from you. And let's see, on that note, I will then kick it off to Bruce, who will talk a little bit more about capacity building.
Thank you, Tara. So you guys see that this is a lot of complex sort of structure that we've created to move y'all along. I just got 2 pieces here that I'd like to make sure that we move through. You'll see on this slide, try to decomplexify this, decomplex it. One of the purposes we have is not just to access the SURF funds, but to make sure we're leveraging this planning money and then our access to the implementation money by working with philanthropic partners and other public and private agencies to make sure this plan has far reach and influences how we invest in the region over time. You see that we've got a $1.25 million fund for inclusivity. It's got 2 components I'll get to in just a moment: participant reimbursement and service contractors. But on the right-hand side of this slide, the eligibility. Too often when we talk about eligibility, it's who we're excluding, but we want to be concentrated here about who we are including. That is, we want to make sure this inclusivity fund is dedicated to folks, to organizations and individuals who might otherwise have trouble making the time or having the resources or having the opportunity to participate and give us contribution. And you can see it's disadvantaged communities, median households definition, high poverty areas, et cetera. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So I mentioned that there are 2 pieces to this, and one is called participant resourcing. The whole idea there is to look at individuals that for participating in the meetings and the governance and the entire structure that we've been talking about, and providing input to make sure that we've got the right intel to shape a sustainable regional plan that responds to the impacts of COVID and creates an energy independent future. are looking at individuals, and you can see the details there, and we'll send more of that coming up. Service contracts and agreements are very much more specific. That is, we recognize that there are organizations that have skills that we want to pay into, partner with you. That is to fill gaps in our outreach, to contribute expertise in doing needs assessment, to deliver training to participant individuals and organizations about how to engage and how to effectively engage, make sure we're getting that right input. And then finally, how to track engagement as well. So we want to make sure that we are taking a big pool of this money, $1.25 million, and moving it into organizations to participate. From there, I believe I'm kicking it back to Quinn.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bruce. So we're going to take a quick second before I welcome our next speaker. I'm going to turn it to all of you and ask for your participation. We're not going to put you in a room or unmute you, so don't get panicked, but we have shared a lot of information already. And we're going to share a link in the chat right now. And it goes to a super simple form with just a couple questions. We're wondering your feedback. Who else should we be connecting with? What projects and initiatives should we know about with all that you've learned? Who's coming to mind? So I'm going to ask you to take a minute, either during the program or afterwards, to fill that out with any information that you think we should know, and send that over to us. And on that note, I'm really excited to welcome our featured speakers today. I'm going to share briefly about both of them and then welcome them one by one. First is Derek Kirk, new Assistant Deputy Secretary of Climate for the California Labor Workforce Development Agency. Derek, we're so excited to have you here. Congratulations on your new role. Derek will be serving as the liaison to the SURF interagency team, as well as be developing a climate workforce strategy and so much more in his new role. As a part of the SURF program since its inception, he was architect of the SURF project, one of the architects of the SURF project, and is incredibly passionate about ensuring that SURF turns the tide for California economic development and how we engage our community partners in envisioning and implementing our economic goals. He's going to touch a bit on how we got here and the importance of SURF statewide. Then after Derek speaks, we will get to welcome Chris Brenner. Chris is professor, chair, and director of the Everett Program and Institute for Social Transformation. His work spans the relationship between technological change and economic restructuring and innovative social justice strategy. I've actually just been reading Chris's book right now that he co-authored with Manuel Pastor, which I highly recommend. Chris is going to share a bit about the barriers to economic opportunity in our region, why this work is so important, and some of the things that are critical for us to continue to center and prioritize through the process. So with that, I'm first going to welcome Derek Kirk.
Thanks so much, Quinn, and it's an honor and a privilege to be with all of you today. I was texting with a few of my state colleagues who have joined from GoBiz and OPR, and it's really fun to feel the energy that the three organizations bring into this work and are bringing into the region. And we look forward to kicking off this process formally here in Sacramento next week. So, economic development is nothing new. Economic development has happened across California, across the country, and around the world for a very long time. And there have been lots of different variations of that work, and different people have different ideas of ultimately what economic development looks like. And this is really our opportunity to reframe and redefine economic development here in California. So as the previous speakers noted, the governor signed SB 162 into law in September of 2021, a really game-changing piece of legislation that was spurred from this governor's efforts right after he was sworn in. When Governor Newsom was sworn into office in 2019, he kicked off really regional initiatives to try to understand and build knowledge and capacity of the regions across the state that have historically been disinvested in, particularly inland California and the Central Coast, finding ways to engage more people in the conversation. Obviously, we went through the period of deep pandemic and lots of closure. And as we came out of pandemic, the SURF legislation was signed into law, and it really gave us a really incredible opportunity to step into a new kind of community together and a new way of doing business in this particular space. So SURF was established with 3 core visions and goals in mind, and these are really the driving force of everything that we do, and are centered at the core of all of our conversations in this process. First, our vision is to build an equitable and sustainable economy across California's regions, and to foster a long-term economic resilience in the overall transition to a carbon neutral economy. Economies in the past have historically been decided by, or economic strategies, by small groups and bodies of people to get a strategy done, and unfortunately they get shelved. And they don't get talked about until it's time to develop a new strategy for the community that we all want to use and potentially strive for. This really is our opportunity to build an economic strategy and an economy from that is equitable and sustainable, and again, hits at all of the touch points that Quinn was mentioning are the goals of y'all's process. Our second vision really is to shift the decision-making power to and build capacity within communities and workers to ultimately lead economic planning processes and decisions past the lifetime of SURF. The SURF legislation allows us to expense funds through 2026. The idea, though, isn't that at the end of 2026, we all pack up and go home. The idea is that we build this collaborative and this high road transition collaborative in this community to stay together, to work together, to continue driving regional economies. And I think it was Bruce's point to access other dollars. There is so much money flowing into our communities right now, and we want to use this as really the framework and the guiding force for all of us moving forward. And then lastly, SURF is an example of the state's larger approach to regional economic planning and transition. There are a number of programs right now at a number of different agencies that are supporting different topic areas, and we're really excited about all of the work that we can be doing together in this space. And SURF, having SURF really serve as a strong foundation, building tables that can be the experts and the guiding forces in the regions that pause and listen to each other when different ideas need to be shared, and ensure that we are hearing from the most disinvested people in all of our communities. Overall, SURF is managed by a multi-agency collaborative at the state level, the Labor and Workforce Development Agency where I work, as well as the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development and the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. And I tell you all that to say, just as many of the previous speakers noted, that this is going to be a hard process. I think Tara said that we're going to hit bumps in the road and we're going to have opportunities where we might get a little frustrated with each other. We experience that too at the state level, because all of our agencies are coming with different perspectives and different backgrounds and different ideas. We are deep in partnership with all of you, and we are deeply engaged in making sure that we stop, we listen, we engage, we strategize, and we move forward together in a collective vision. You all might not sing from the same song sheet by the time this is done, but if you can pause and listen to each other and not interrupt when others are speaking and hear other people's ideas, this process will have been successful. And this process will help develop a framework and a strategy that changes lives in your community. I'll end by saying, prior to being in Sacramento, I lived in the city of Atascadero and was privileged to be a resident of the Central Coast and to work with Melissa and her team at REACH and other organizations there. And Melissa always inspired me when she would talk about the purpose behind inclusive economic planning. For her was for her kids, her 2 daughters, to make sure that they had opportunities in the Central Coast and that they had opportunities to get really good paying jobs and live in a community that cared for them and that they could care for. Late last year, my wife and I welcomed a little boy into our lives. And there's a whole new meaning to doing inclusive economic development and inclusive planning work for our kids. We're doing it for our neighbors. We're doing it for those that are around us. So I look forward to your partnership and to supporting all of you in this work. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Derek. So great to just hear from you about a little bit about where this has been, where it's come from, and can feel your passion for it. So appreciate that so much. All right, now it is my pleasure to welcome Chris Brenner.
Well, thank you so much, Quinn. And it's just really a pleasure and honor to be with all of you and all 176 people who are part of this meeting at the moment. It's really, a tribute to people's interest and the importance of this work that all of you are here today. What I want to do is help us reflect a little bit on where we are as a region, as a state, and our economy, and the opportunity that gives us with SURF, as multiple people have said so far, to do something different. And a reminder that, some of the background about where the SURF funding came from was out of a reminder in the COVID, which we're still suffering from, but the pandemic that revealed so many deep crises in our society, an inequality crisis, an economic crisis, the climate crisis, all coming together. And, what we see on the right are statistics that predated COVID of some of the depth of poverty and inequality in our society, despite the wealth that our economy produces. 46% of Americans couldn't access $400 in an emergency, just living paycheck to paycheck. We often think of poverty as being really deep poverty and endemic and a long-term experience. But when you look at the data, in fact, by age 60, 4 out of 5 Americans will have experienced at least one full year of poverty or joblessness. And I'm not talking here about students in school. These are people, in the workforce who, for no fault of their own, become unemployed or have some other crisis and experience poverty or joblessness. Healthcare, we know, is a huge problem, that we have still 28 million people without any health insurance and 44 million more with inadequate health insurance. And that became so clear in the pandemic. And of course, the sharp racial disparities that are part of that then became so apparent too in those especially early days of the pandemic, when billionaire wealth surged 70% as the tech industry really took off in the midst of the pain that was so much part of the pandemic for so many of us. And one of the elements of that is, of course, that the disease revealed that deep racial disparities in both exposure to COVID and vulnerability to COVID. And Black and Native and Latino people have died at 2 times the rate of white people, non-Hispanic white people. And that reflects the multiple intersecting vulnerabilities that communities of color and low-income communities face in our society. The other thing I want us to remember as part of that, though, is that inequality is not just a social problem, it's an economic problem. And the work that I have done over many years now with Manuel Pastor in looking at regions across the country and what makes for successful regions that are able to have equity and growth, and trying to understand how and why that's the case. And I could bore you for hours with data on that, and we'll hopefully have a chance to look more at data. But just to highlight a few things, one of the things that we looked at is resilience and the ability of regions to deal with economic shocks and social shocks. And, it turns out that income inequality is the single largest predictor of a region going into a recession sooner or being less resilient. But things that are also important include racial segregation, the fragmentation of local government within our broader economic regions really prevents regions from responding collaboratively and coming together to deal with economic and social shocks. And the way that our voting patterns and political allegiances are sorted by space all contribute to the lack of resilience and point to the importance of us coming together as a region to deal with these issues. And on the map on the right is just an example of sort of a multi-dimensional index of opportunity in the northern part of our region, the Monterey Bay region, our 3-county area here, and just shows some of the spatial inequalities of that, where our coastal areas in Santa Cruz and the Monterey Peninsula have much higher levels of economic environmental, housing, transportation, educational opportunities compared to many of the inland areas, which are predominantly communities of color compared to the predominantly non-Hispanic white communities in the region. So all of that points to, I think what's embedded in the SURF goals, and I think what we all recognize is that we should not be thinking about going back to a normal that did not work for so many, that we need to be recovering in a way that reimagines a different future and that lifts up our commonality and really addresses these inequality. And I think that's the opportunity that we really have in SURF. And I wanted to lift up some of the language that was in the original call for proposal as a reminder to us that this is about building an equitable and sustainable economy for long-term economic resilience. This isn't just a short-term, how do we respond to the crisis of the moment, but how do we change our decision-making processes and economic structures that can build that long-term resilience around a high-road economy that favors those businesses that invest in their workforces, that pay living wages, that engage in environmentally sustainable business practices, in which we have community and worker-centered inclusive economic planning. And the call for proposals calls out very explicitly that we can't be doing the same approach to economic planning. That's just not an option. And we have this opportunity with this funding and the way we're coming together to really build something that's different. But as Tara has said and others have said, it's not going to be easy. We should expect difficult conversations. And what's going to get us through those difficult conversations is a recognition that we're all in this together in some way, that we have a destiny together as a region. And if we don't learn how to talk through our differences, we're going to just continue the patterns in the past, that we have to figure out how do we come together with those different backgrounds, different priorities, different life experiences. And I think part of that is recognizing that that relational infrastructure of us communicating together and building those relationships is as important as roads and housing and broadband and physical infrastructure. It's not as visible, and it often doesn't get prioritized in the same way. But I think if we think about the conversations we're having and the structures we're trying to build and creating that in a way as actually building that infrastructure for long-term resilience, it'll help us recognize that those difficult conversations are strengthening that infrastructure and getting us to that future. I would say a second challenge is that it's hard to really get the importance of equity inclusion. I think many of us recognize now we have to be talking about it. There's the importance of it, but really understanding in our language, in our actions, that equity and inclusion is central for economic outcomes, not just social outcomes, that's actually a critical part of economic wellness, economic competitiveness, economic growth is when we recognize our mutuality, minimize inequality, ensure inclusion for all. And there's many data points that can demonstrate that and lots of research, but how do we really understand that in our practices? And it comes up in so many different ways of like, oh yeah, it's not quite getting it. And again, in the language of the RFP, there's things like we need to be including voices that have been traditionally left out of economic planning. I think we need to be centering voices that have been traditionally left out of economic planning. How do we do that? How do we center those perspectives and experiences of marginalized communities in our regions to help us all understand better the strength, the resilience, the resources that are not recognized in those communities, and mobilize them and marshal them for our economic competitiveness to achieve not just equitable outcomes, but economic outcomes, because that's a critical part of bringing those resources to our economic region. And one example is this kickoff meeting in Sacramento. And the way it was organized from the state was primarily conveners and the fiscal agents for this kickoff meeting. And there's a limited size and limited space. But in that context, when you look, and I've had a chance to look at who's participating in that meeting there, it is not centering the voices of those traditionally left out. It is providing an opportunity for conveners and fiscal agents to come together and meet with the state. So that has an important role, but where are we making the space for centering those roles of those traditionally left out voices? And one of the things that I'll point to that's interesting is in some of the regions around the state, particularly the Inland Empire and the southern border region, it took mediation between competing proposals to get to the point where a proposal could get forward to get state funding. We have the great fortune in our region of having open and accessible conveners and really trying to build a collaborative convening process, so we didn't have to go through that. But one of the outcomes that came out of those difficult conversations they had in the Inland Empire and the southern border region is that there are people from deeply rooted marginalized communities that are going to be in Sacramento from those regions. And what is that going to mean in terms of the character of the conversations that are part of that? So I lift that up as just another example of how do we center voices of those who have been traditionally left out in all activities of SURF and help ensure at a statewide level, as well as at our work locally, that happens. And again, the last thing that I would lift up about that is this urgent need to think long-term. And this comes from organizers and activists that I've heard actually in the LA region, sort of coming out of the uprising and the Rodney King riots in the early 90s, is we need to be thinking about those long-term goals and how do we get there step by step so that each of our steps are pointing to those North Stars, because it's going to take a long time to restructure our economy in a way that centers equity and inclusion and really rebuilds our strength and resilience and economic well-being. And the last thing I'll say, because I've probably gone on for too long already, is there are lots of other resources out there. And one that I'll point to that I'm involved in is this Community Economic Mobilization Initiative, which is a whole number of foundations and philanthropy that have come together, centered by the center at Sierra Health Foundation, to provide more resources for community organizations, those that have not been as centrally involved in economic development planning and decision making. And my institute at Santa Cruz has come together with the Equity Research Institute, led by Manuel Pastor at USC, and PolicyLink to help build a set of technical assistance and resources and training materials that will be available to community organizations in the Central Coast as well as throughout the state. We will be launching a website early next week at CEMI Resources, Community Economic Mobilization Initiative Resources.org. So keep an eye out for those resources. And yeah, just to finally say, I'm so happy to be in this conversation with you all and look forward to our work together, not just in the next 2 years, but the next 20 years.
Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate hearing from you, and especially so much on centering the experiences of those who have historically been excluded from planning tables. And I think it's a really good reminder that our governance structure is about centering these voices, and that's why this is our first step together. Looking forward to having a lot of these difficult conversations. We are going to do two things right now. I'm going to put the form that we didn't have the correct permissions in. Sorry about that. We're going to put that in the chat again right now if you didn't see it. And I want you to be thinking as we head into this final portion of our time today, there's probably some questions bubbling up. And if you have those questions, please pop them in the chat. And any last minutes that we have together, we're going to try and answer those questions, and we'll kind of know the things that we need to be addressing. Next, we're going to share about some of our really important steps over the next couple weeks and months and ways that you can get engaged. Lady is going to walk us through this next part, an overview of our different steering committees, their functions and requirements, and how to nominate yourself or someone else. So I'm going to welcome Lady, who is our project manager.
Thank you, Queen. Yes, I'm so excited listening to all these words and concepts that we believe in. So our governance structure for the Uplift Coalition balances decision-making of all critical constituencies with an emphasis on centering the voices of historically underserved and disinvested communities. All governance groups will seek to integrate and balance gender, racial, and geographic diversity. So we are going to have a structure where we are going to have the the Vision Committee, that it's going to be made by approximately 6 to 12 trusted leaders with representations from at least one leader per county. And the Vision Committee will select the steering committee members from nominations. And who are the people in the steering committees? We are going to have 2 steering committees, one for the Northern region and one for the South region. And each of one are going to coordinate and work through these 12 constituencies as required. And this structure is intended to ensure representation from each of the 12 constituencies. And 2 representatives, one from the North and one from the South, serve on a steering committee to represent the voices of their consistency and proposed projects or programs. These 2 groups are going to meet monthly, and it's going to be the main way to work with all the information that we are going to be collecting from the community. Additional opportunities to engage beyond these 2 committees are the issue roundtables. And we were talking about that before. The issue roundtables will be grounded in served objectives across economic opportunity, equity, and sustainability. And the issues will be prioritized based on data and research, community feedback, and input from the steering committees. The steering committees will help facilitate and populate these issue roundtables, and the steering committees will integrate roundtable input, prioritize issues, and make recommendations to the advisory committee on projects and programs to include in our regional plan. So how can you be part of these vision and steering committees? In the next slide. The main requirement is about participation. The main requirement is anyone in the Central Coast region can apply or be nominated to join a steering committee. And you need to be committed to work on the steering committee and participate in monthly meetings through December 2024. The Vision Committee meetings will be held during business hours, and the steering committee meetings will be held during a weekday lunch hour. The Vision Committee will select the members of the sub-regional steering committees from the nominations. And how to nominate? You can self-nominate or nominate others. You may submit multiple nominations as well as self-nominate, but you can only participate in one committee. The nomination period is open now and closes on April 6. And regarding the Inclusivity Fund, we're going to use the Inclusivity Fund to provide committee members and stakeholders with resources to participate in the planning process, ensuring the inclusive engagement of essential partners and prioritization for undercapitalized and under-resourced individuals and organizations. Participation funds will be available to participants through a simple request process, but this is mainly a volunteer position that you need to commit to work on. So please share with your networks, with other organizations, help us to promote. And we are going to put in the chat all the nomination forms. And we're very excited about this piece. It's really the piece that is going to be connecting all the pieces together. So I really invite everyone, every gender, every race, every people living in the Central Coast is able to apply and participate in this process. Thank you, Quinn.
Yes, thank you so much, Lady. All right, so as we have just our last few minutes, I'm going to share a little bit about what we're really looking for these committee members to be committed to. These governing bodies are critical to shaping our work ahead and our final product. We are looking for people who are committed to the tough conversations that we've been talking about today. Tough conversations, big decisions, those who are committed to shared decision-making power and equitable solutions. Our steering committee members will actively work to understand different perspectives, build trust, and understanding across differences. If you or someone that you know is a person who can approach this process with a we before me attitude, putting our community's best first, even when there are competing priorities, we would love your partnership on one of the governing committees. So I'm going to ask that you please give this some thought and share widely. We're really looking for new voices and fresh perspectives to be at the table on this. As Lady said, the nomination process will be open until April 6th. And we would welcome you to share that widely. We will send a follow-up email to this meeting that will include the recording of today, so you can share that with people who weren't able to make it here. They can learn a bit more about the process. We'll share the link to the nomination form, and we'll share the link to the community voices form, just to get more people and perspectives that you think we should be engaging with. With that, we are going to conclude. We're running out of time. We were hoping to maybe answer a few questions, but we are going to, anything that we hear from you, we will definitely circle back and get back to all your questions. And we look forward to meeting you all and working with you in the future. You'll be hearing from us lots more, and we'll be continuing to gather in this way, both virtually and in person. So please look out for more from us in the coming weeks and months. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here and prioritizing this community space. Lots more ahead. Thank you all.